guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Esperanza and I currently live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest. I was living in Portland, Oregon for about 5 years before we decided to move to Nashville in January 2020. The reason that I'm doing this video today is because it was requested recently and I had been thinking about doing this video for a while, but I was kind of like procrastinating on it, so I decided to sit down and talk about this today. So we were living in Nashville for about 7 months, I think, when we first moved to Nashville from Portland. The big reason why we moved was because we wanted to be able to travel and be closer to like other major cities, which we kind of figured Nashville was, because living in Portland, the only closest city to us was really Seattle. And then besides that was like San Francisco, which was like an 8 to 9 hour drive. So it was appealing to be closer to other major cities living in Nashville because I do write a ton of travel content on my blog, The Urban Darling. So that was a big reason. Another big reason was because we wanted to be able to buy a house, and homes in the Nashville area and just like that part of the country in general are a lot less expensive than homes back in Washington or Oregon where I grew up. So that was definitely an appeal for us, was being able to buy a home sooner because we'd have to save longer to buy a home back in Pacific Northwest. Nashville was always one of those cities that I thought that I could see myself living in one day because of like the music history. Both Skylar and I love music, so that definitely appealed to us. So that's kind of why we chose Nashville over like any other major city. And then of course, after 7 months living there, we moved. So I'm going to be going into kind of like the reasons as to why we decided to leave Nashville. So I'm just going to list some of our main reasons, and hopefully like this will make sense. One of the main reasons why we decided that we couldn't live there long term was because of the tornadoes. So funny thing is that when we were telling like friends and family that we were going to move to Nashville, one of the things that came up several times was the fact that it was in Tornado Alley. But growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I feel like I never heard Nashville being like a place that got a lot of tornadoes. So that really wasn't like a concern of mine at the time. But of course, when we moved there, we had literally been there not even like a week or two, and the worst tornado to hit Nashville since like 1998, which was the year that my sister was born, so like 22 years ago. The worst tornado since that tornado happened like 2 weeks after we were living there. So that really freaked me out. Thankfully, it was on like the other side of Nashville other than what we lived in, because I remember hearing like the sirens and everything going on that night, but I didn't know what it meant because we had just moved there. We'd never experienced anything like that before. So that definitely freaked me out. So the thought of like buying a home there and potentially having it damaged by a tornado definitely kind of like freaked me out. There were a few like influencers that I knew that lived close to the tornado, one of whom like had just bought in a house and everything, and the tornado hit like a mile away from where she lived. So that just like really freaked me out. And then besides that, we had like constant tornado warnings all throughout the 7 months we lived there. A lot of like rainstorms, serious, thunder and rainstorms that could lead to a potential tornado happened like super often. We always had our power going out. It was just not very fun dealing with. Not only that, but the humidity there was so bad, and we also had a lot of people telling us about the humidity before we moved there, but I really didn't think it was going to be anything that bad because I do somewhat like the heat, but more of like a dry heat, and I hadn't really experienced like that level of humidity, and it was just not good for us. I think all summer long I pretty much just wore like a little cami or a tank top with like super short denim shorts because it was just so hot everywhere. It was also really hard on Indio since he has like very thick curly black hair. He would just get like overheated super easily. Around the same time that the tornado happened, quarantine began. So we definitely didn't get to experience Nashville to the fullest, which was a bummer. We tried to explore as much of the city as we could while still being safe and everything, but it definitely, I think, just made like our time there not that fun. So even though that wasn't like a main reason as to why we moved, that kind of like played into it, I think. We also just didn't feel like we totally fit in Nashville. It's hard to explain because generally people in the South are pretty friendly, so that was nice and like a little bit different, but in general it just didn't really seem like it was 100% a fit for us. We really enjoyed like Portland, so we kind of wanted to find a city that was a little bit more similar to like Portland. I don't want to make it seem like we are hating on Nashville because we definitely did like it. There were lots of things that we liked about it. We loved the music history. There are a lot of cool like restaurants and shops. The thrifting there was absolutely amazing, and my thrifting game has not been the same ever since. But it just didn't quite seem like we fit in. Like, I don't know how to explain it. There just seems to be like a certain type of people that live there that I think that they're super cool for like living in Nashville. It kind of felt like a little bit like LA to me, to be honest, just where, I don't know, people think that they're like super cool because they like live in that city. So I don't want to go like too much into it, but in general I kind of felt like there was a little bit of like snobbiness. That being said, we would definitely love to go back to Nashville at some point and really do it right when everything's like open back up again. We never even got to like experience the honky tonks or anything on Broadway. We did like go to Broadway, but we didn't really go into any of the honky tonks, and then before we knew it, everything was shut down. So we'd love to go back someday and do it right. So the reason that we chose Pittsburgh is kind of random. Skylar had actually been in a band for 5 years that toured the country, so he got to see like a lot of different cities in the country and get like a feel for them. And Philadelphia and Pittsburgh were a couple of the cities that he would always say that he thought that I would like. So we started kind of like doing some research about Pittsburgh, and that's when we discovered that it was a very safe city because there's tons of like colleges here, a lot of like younger families and students and stuff. So in general, it's a pretty safe city. It ranks like really high on that scale. The homes here were also, I think, a little bit less expensive than the ones in Nashville. I could be wrong about that, but definitely less expensive than the ones in the Pacific Northwest where we're from. And the fact that it's very close to like Chicago, Cleveland, Cincinnati, New York, like so many major cities. Since living in Pittsburgh, we actually did a trip to Philadelphia and to New York. So that has been really nice, being in like driving distance to a lot of really cool East Coast cities. We just really love like that East Coast vibe. Mainly I think it's because of the architecture. Like there's so many really beautiful old cathedrals here. The homes here are like very old and beautiful. They just don't like make homes and buildings like that anymore, especially not where we're from. Everything's like very commercial and new. So I think we just really appreciate that like old charm and character. We actually did take a trip to Pittsburgh before moving here to get like a general feel for the city, and we just really liked the vibe of it. It's pretty similar to Portland because there's like a river that goes around the city, so there's lots of like bridges. This like city skyline was really cool, so I really liked that, and it just had like a lot of character and charm, so that's like why we chose Pittsburgh overall. So when we left Nashville, we actually had to find someone to take over our lease because it was a 13-month lease and we'd been there 7 out of the 13 months, and we were actually going to buy a home in Pittsburgh, and that ended up being a disaster and falling through, which I'll have to do like another video about that, like a story time video just about that experience alone. I've been meaning to do it since we moved here, but I just haven't been able to. I think I just kind of like didn't want to like rehash it and like relive it because it was a bummer to say the least. So I kind of just have been like avoiding making that video, but it's been a long enough time now that I think I'm ready to share that experience. So maybe in one of my videos coming up, I will finally share that story time. And I think one of the next videos I'm going to do is a pros and cons of living in Pittsburgh. We are going on month 6 of living in Pittsburgh, so I think that I have a pretty good knowledge of what my personal pros and cons of living in Pittsburgh are. So I think that's gonna be my next video. My hair is still kind of wet, so I've been like messing with it this whole time. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you guys have any specific questions about living in Nashville or living in Pittsburgh, please comment them down below and I'll do my best to answer. And be sure to keep your eye out for those 2 videos that I will be posting soon, one of which will be the pros and cons of living in Pittsburgh, and the other will be a story time of our experience with losing the home that we were trying to buy in Pittsburgh and just like the whole disaster that situation was. If you guys aren't subscribed already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!